the top headlines making news at the University of Limpopo this week. A biologist at the University of Limpopo is looking into adding insects to meals amid rising food prices.
Can you get into trouble for lying on social media and impersonating someone? We will talk to a Master of Laws student to unpack this trend.
Limpopo Alumni and Convocation chapter is set to prioritize postgraduate funding in 2024.
And in your sport, 4 dancers have jetted off to the Netherlands to represent South Africa in World Dance Championships.
Well, these are some of the headlines for this week at the University of Limpopo. We are watching Inside UL News. Na, it's Hepo Wagamujaki Tobe.
And I am Itumeleng Depela. The Bureau for Food and Agricultural Policy found that a family of 4 would need to spend 2,524 a month on basic food. This is about 32% of a household's monthly spend, which means that a family of 4 would need to earn 7,800 per month just to afford basic food groceries.
South Africans are becoming increasingly negative regarding the growth prospect and the quality of life. Well, maybe, just maybe, you don't have to worry that much because a biologist at the University of Limpopo Science Education Center, Dr. Brown Egan, is hard at work to add insects to our delectable meals.
Her research identifies edible insects found in South Africa that could be mass-produced, addressing concerns about food insecurity and the need for more environmentally sustainable food sources.
Well, she's joining us virtually from the University of Limpopo Science Education Center to discuss this interesting research. Dr. Egan, thank you so much for joining us right here on Inside UL News. Can you tell us which of these insects do you like so far?
I really enjoy grasshoppers. They're my favorites. Fried and with a little bit of shebo. And then mopani worms are wonderful, but they have to be cooked by somebody who knows how to do it. So I really like the ones from Botswana, and then there's a lady in Venda who cooks them into a beautiful stew. And termites are also good. The makeke, the ones with the little pincers at the back, they're great, and as well as neme, they're also very good. Yeah, those are my favorites.
Now, Dr. Egan, what inspired the research and what possible benefits do you see in incorporating insects into these meals?
Yeah, so we have reached the 8 billion mark of the number of people on our planet, and there's a lot of worry and concern around food security on the planet, and a lot of research is going into how can we feed our people better than we're doing now, because there's also worries about environmental impact of a lot of our farming methods. Lots of pesticides being utilized, herbicides, fertilizers, and a lot of land taken up. So insects can be farmed on a much smaller scale, and they've been utilized for millennia, for aeons. So they're not a novel food source. They're a very ancient food source, but modern 21st century man has not used them for many years. And so to us, they're new and novel. But if you're going to feed somebody something, then you want to know what species it is you're eating. And so the research that we're currently doing is looking at the DNA and the genetics of the insects to work out exactly which species are edible and to be able to package them correctly and give the correct information about the species that are being utilized.
So how does the research aim to address concerns about food insecurity in South Africa, and what specific edible insects are being identified as potential candidates for mass production?
So edible insects utilize much less land, water, sunlight than conventional livestock. So they are more environmentally sustainable. They have a higher feed conversion rate, which means that for the same amount of food that you give an edible insect, you will get a lot more out of it for feed for yourself than you would in terms of poultry or other livestock like cattle, etc. So the feed conversion rate is great. And then they also are, you can farm them in a much, much smaller scale, and you need less input, less infrastructure in order to farm these creatures. However, at the moment in South Africa, most edible insects consumed are wild harvested. And so much research is needed around the ecology of the insects and the population biology. We don't want to go out and harvest all our wild insects and then have nothing to show for it. So there's information that we require around the habitat requirements of these insects and how we can farm them sustainably and how we can collect them sustainably.
So, Dr. Egan, in what ways do edible insects offer a more environmentally sustainable alternative to traditional livestock, especially in the context of South Africa?
Edible insects produce less methane, so one of the concerns around climate change and farming with conventional livestock is the methane that's produced. As I said before, they have a smaller footprint in terms of the amounts of land that they need, and they're also, it's the entire insect that gets eaten. So if you're eating a cow, for instance, you are going to not normally eat all the offal, all the bones, the skin you won't eat, whereas with an insect you eat pretty much everything except for the wings and sometimes the legs. So you're eating the whole animal, and there's less waste that's happening, and they can also be farmed, we think, more humanely. So it's easier to supply the requirements that an insect needs naturally in an artificial environment than it is for some of the livestock that we produce on a massive scale. If you think of battery farm chickens and pigs that are kept in great numbers, it's probably more humane to keep insects than to keep bigger livestock on a mass scale.
Now, considering the historical consumptions of insect in Africa, especially our province Limpopo, how has the perspective of edible insects evolved?
It's interesting. In South Africa, we are one of those countries that have traditionally eaten insects for many, many years. However, we also have aspects of our country that are really modern and follow a 21st century lifestyle. So there's two different perceptions, three actually. There's people who have eaten insects their entire lives and really enjoy them and eat them as a delicacy and sometimes as a staple. And they know from observation and traditional ways of doing things that they are nutritious. They have that from felt observation and from eating the insects themselves. And then you have people who have become divorced from traditional ways of living. So people like us who live in the cities, it's very difficult for us to harvest insects. You can't buy them in the shops, you're not used to eating them. And so we generally, city dwellers, urban dwellers, have rather a worried look when you ask them to eat insects. We're just not used to it. And then you get people who are interested in novel foods, interested in new experiences, and who have heard that insects are now on the market and they're a new thing to eat. And so you also get people who are really willing to try this thing that they see as a novel food, which is actually an ancient food. So there's three different ways of looking at edible insects in our country, in South Africa. And what we are discovering is that we almost have to go back to people who live in the rural areas and corroborate the stories that their grandparents are telling them. So the children might not be interested in eating the insects, and we have to say, but actually what your grandparents are telling you is true. They are very good for you, and this is why, and this is what we've found in scientifically concerning the nutritional value. So it's quite interesting.
And can you tell us, are there any nutritional value?
Absolutely. They are a really, really good source of protein. So a higher percentage of protein than beef, depends on the insect, but generally 35 to 65% of protein, dry mass. They have good fats, lots of polyunsaturated fats. Generally the caterpillars carry the most polyunsaturated fats. They're good to eat. They have a bland flavor, so you can add a lot of different flavors to them. They have minerals, zinc, magnesium, calcium, all of those you get in greater quantities than you would from cattle. And often the amino acids and the other nutrients are more bioavailable, so they're very digestible and your body finds it easy to access them. So nutritionally they're wonderful. There are some people who are allergic to them, and there are also concerns around heavy metals. So we haven't done enough research to know how they sequester heavy metals and if they do pick them up. At the present moment, we've seen that there's fewer or there's less danger of heavy metal accumulation in insects than, for example, in fish. So yes, they're really, really nutritious, but there are over 2,000 edible insects in the world, and we haven't done the nutritional value on all of them, so there's always things to learn. But we've done it on enough insects to know that they're a good, healthy source of protein and fat. And the danger is that if they end up being marketed as a health food, which is highly likely because they are so nutritious, would this then price them out of the range of the people who we are most concerned about in terms of food security? So if somebody's coming along and harvesting all your edible insects in your backyard and then you can't afford to buy them back, that is a concern.
All right, Dr. Egan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's such a pleasure, and thank you very much to marketing for the opportunity for us to share our research and get interest around it. Thanks.
Moving to other news, in recent times, a surge of cases globally and within South Africa has brought to light the concerning trend of individuals impersonating others, creating social media parody accounts, and engaging in misrepresentation on various online platforms.
The question on everyone's mind is whether these actions amount to a punishable crime and what threshold could lead to individuals into legal trouble.
Now, to shed light on this complex issue, joining us virtually is Arnold Mzimba, a Master of Law student at the University of Limpopo, to delve into the legal dimension of impersonation both in the real world and the digital realm. Mr. Mzimba, thank you so much for joining us right here on Inside UL News.
Thank you for having me, and greetings to Inside UL News viewers.
Mr. Mzimba, what legal challenges does this pose in terms of identifying and prosecuting individuals who are involved in this impersonation?
Okay. Now, with the technological advancements that we see worldwide, it awakens our legislature to further strengthen our legal system to accommodate these developments. If we have the National Prosecuting Authority saying it may not prosecute for lack of evidence, sometimes it is not lack of evidence per se, but the issue of identifying the actual perpetrator, given the fact that some of these crimes are committed online and it becomes rather impractical or difficult to identify the perpetrator in such cases. So it awakens our legislature to focus on developing our law to accommodate the recent trends, and also to even focus on those crimes which would appear trivial some 20 years ago, because now things have changed.
Mr. Mzimba, what legal challenges does this pose in terms of identifying and prosecuting individuals who are implicated in impersonation?
So there's a great difference or a distinction therein when you look at someone who poses online as somebody else. There's difficulty in tracing such a person, because most of these accounts or these fake social media accounts are created with that intention of defrauding individuals or victimizing individuals online. And they, from the onset, they know that it would be difficult to trace them, given the fact that some of these social media companies are rather owned outside South Africa, where you must either get a court order to get their real identities or to have information pertaining to such an account released onto the National Prosecuting Authority within South Africa. So in real life, it is rather easier. Like we have observed, some of these individuals are actually caught red-handed, wearing either a police official uniform or with a name tag that they actually are not that person. So in real life, it's much more easier to get these individuals to account, but online it leaves the legislature with no option but rather to follow the recent trends, like many other countries are doing now, to put laws that are going to make it even more stricter to to get onto social media or to open social media accounts as such.
Now, from a legal perspective, what are the key challenges between impersonation in social media and in real life, and how do these differences impact the legal grounds for pursuing cases of impersonation?
So we do have laws in South Africa, and the recent trends of impersonators should rather awaken the legislature to strengthen its hand when it comes to enforcing penalties. When I say we do have laws, in 2019, the National Qualifications Framework Act was amended to create offenses where now it is criminalized for someone to falsely or fraudulently claim to be holding a certain qualification or to belong to a certain profession when they're actually not registered. And in the case of registration, we've got the Health Professions Act, which says, you may not diagnose, you may not advise, you may not give treatment when you are actually not registered with the HPCSA as such. So we do have laws, even common law. We've got the common law crime of fraud, defamation of character, corporate defamation. So we do have existing laws in place to try and combat these crimes. But what is needed, from my understanding, is awareness and maybe ensuring that these individuals are brought to account so as to deter others from committing these crimes.
All right, so are there any gaps in the legal framework that need to be addressed to effectively combat this issue?
Most definitely. The fact that these criminals are still out here posing, or stealing people's identities, show us the extent to which the law enforcement agency, talking about the SAPS in the instance, should go to try and enforce the law, because like we've already said, the law is there to try and combat these crimes. But now it's a question of the law enforcement agency to say, okay, fine, if someone reports this type of a crime, do not say it is trivial, or because when we measure the extent to which a person is victimized by a crime, from a legal perspective, I may not measure how far a crime impacts on a person, but when we look at a psychological angle or a financial angle in the case of defamation, that's when we can see that these crimes are not as trivial as they are usually taken to be. So there are gaps, but at the very same time, I acknowledge the progress that our country has made in trying to combat these crimes. Like I've mentioned, in 2019, there was an amendment to that act, and also in recent times, we saw entry of the POPI Act, to protect the issue of personal information of individuals. So there are strides compared to other African countries. I think our country is moving in the right direction to a certain extent.
And have you come across any notable cases of impersonation, either on social media or in real life? And how do these cases actually shape the legal understanding and the treatment of impersonation?
So there's a lot of case law that shows us that our courts have recently and for a long time dealt with these cases of impersonation as such. We have people posing as police officials when that is actually criminalized. There's still police uniforms. We have people posing as lawyers. They attempt to go to police officials trying to get the likes of police bail and many other things. So there is case law to that effect, and in most instances it makes it difficult for such individuals to even get remedies like bail pre-trial. But in terms of how this is now shaping the legal system now, it exposes the gaps within our law, and it further calls for a reform in terms of our legal system, to say, insofar as we already have laws, but we still have impersonators, we still have identity frauds, or people taking people's identities, it shows us the extent to which we can still go to improve our legal system.
Now, as a student who's pursuing a Master of Law, let's take, for instance, someone who's known as Dr. Lani on social media, whose case has been making round, which was withdrawn by the National Prosecuting Authority. What recommendations or legal reforms would you propose to address the complex surrounding the issue of impersonation?
So there should be a further fostering of policy initiative to lead to more clarity on the law. The law is there, but it needs to be even more clearer to say, in the case you are suspected of having committed this crime, how then do we go about punishing you? Now, when you talk about punishment, you look at the purposes of punishment. One of them being deterrence. We need to deter others from committing this crime. We need to incapacitate you, because when we talk about this crime, they're not as trivial. They can be financial losses, or when we look in the context of corporate defamation. So I think there must be further policy initiative and more awareness on the law, so that individuals are aware of the law, so that they are not found to be on the wrong side of it.
Mr. Mzimba, please tell us, do organizations like universities have to sue those using their names? Is it practical that would be like an ant and an elephant?
I wouldn't say they have to sue, but I would rather say they have to take action, because we are looking at their identity as a corporate organization or as a university as such, because they have a right to their good name. Suing may seem harsh or rather impractical, but action should be taken, like in the case of a student or any person posing as a student. The university can rather demand that the student make a public apology, or rather the universities can focus on more awareness campaigns on these existing laws that criminalize the acts of impersonation.
All right, so many social media profiles online seem to have either false credentials or exaggerated. Is that a crime?
Yes, it is a crime. Like I've already said, with the National Qualifications Framework Act being amended in 2019 now, no one may pose either online or in person or howsoever to be holding a certain qualification when they actually do not hold such a qualification. We've got Section 32B, subsection 3 of that act, which criminalizes that act of claiming to be holding a certain qualification, and also the common law crime of fraud, because in most instances, an individual misrepresents themselves to be holding a certain qualification with the view of getting a certain benefit. Now that amounts to fraud in that case, if it may be proved. But then also we must look at the issue of whether someone actually suffered any loss or prejudice. And also it becomes rather difficult in some cases. You find that it is not easy to prove that a person created a false account with a criminal mind. So it is not always that when someone poses as this, we will say they are suspected or they are guilty of a certain crime. So it always goes back to the question of saying, is there anybody who suffered harm as a result of this individual posing as a doctor or as a lawyer when they actually are not, or to be holding a certain qualification when they do not hold it? Because in all honesty, it may not be sound legally to prosecute someone when there is no actual victim.
All right, Mr. Mzimba, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's an absolute pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Well, more of your news will follow after the short break. Stay with us.
Thank you for staying with us. In a recent gathering at the university's EduPark campus in Polokwane, the Limpopo Alumni and Convocation chapter convened for its annual general meeting to reflect on the past year's achievements and strategic planning for the future.
Addressing the assembly, Professor Kwena Masham, the University Registrar and Standing Secretariat of Alumni and Convocation, said the university has grown in leaps and bounds, urging alumni to actively contribute to its development.
Your university continues to do well and grow in leaps and bounds to achieve its mission of being a leading African university that is focused on the developmental needs of its communities, epitomizing academic excellence and innovativeness. And we continue to strive to find these solutions for Africa. Of course, that is being done in many ways. Amongst those is that wherever you are, and that's how we must also understand this vision and our motto. Wherever you are, each day that you wake up, each day that you find a solution to something, no matter how big or small, it is in fulfillment of our mission. You are carrying out the mission of the University of Limpopo.
In his comprehensive report, the chairperson of the Limpopo Alumni and Convocation Association chapter, Lekoko Nkadimeng, highlighted the chapter's unwavering commitment to enhancing the academic project. Notable accomplishments from the past year include the allocation of bursaries to 20 deserving students, the clearance of 40 historical debts, and the donation of laptops to 8 academically promising students.
The chapter's dedication to holistic student development was further evident in its facilitation of numerous experiential learning opportunities. Nkadimeng added that there has been partnership with companies owned by university alumni to offer experiential training.
Looking ahead to the 2024 academic year, Nkadimeng outlined the chapter's strategic priorities. He emphasized a focus on post-graduate student funding, saying the chapter aims to assist 200 post-graduate students with registrations and various support initiatives.
Well, let's take a short break. When we return, Itumeleng is going to take you into the exciting world of sports. Stay tuned.
Thank you so much for staying with us. In your sport, the University of Limpopo UL Dance Sports Studio will be sending 2 exceptional dance couples to compete in the Dutch Open Championships and Open World Championships in the Netherlands from 8 to 12 November 2023. The team jetted off to the Netherlands on Monday. Happy Ramano and Adelaide Tlungwani representing the Over 30 Championship, and Mulemo Muhulani and Akane Tlungwani representing the Youth Championship couple will showcase their extraordinary talent on the global stage. Ramano and Tlungwani, the ballroom and Latin couple dancers, enter this year's Dutch Open Championship as defending champions. Their remarkable performance at the World Dance Championship WDC in 2022 secured them a gold medal in their debut international appearance, leaving an indelible mark on the history of dance. To earn the opportunity to represent South Africa, these dance couples underwent a rigorous selection process, competing nationally in all 4 Super Series competition events and the South African Open Dance Championships. The UL dance teams demonstrated unparalleled skill and dedication, securing their positions as the #1 ranked competitors in all Super Series events across various categories. And this brings us to the end of our news bulletins for this week. This is Inside UL News.
Nna ke Tshepo wa ga Mojaki go ba go fihlela re kopana gape bekeng eo e tlago ke re Lerato a Shelewe.